Solium Infernum is a rare gem of a strategy game. On the one hand, deeply political, where all of your decisions and orders matter, and on the other, willing to put up a fight and potentially stab you in the back while you're not looking. A civilization in hell. Thank you to League of Geeks for sponsoring this video and providing me with an early access look at the game, as well as my multiplayer friend. You can check it out using the link below. I'd highly encourage you to do so because the full game is out now. Let's jump in. In the beginning, we have one decision to make. Which Archfiend will we play as? Each with their own unique sort of playstyle or play focus. A power tree unlocks, all ready to go for spells or rituals. Or, alternatively on the right, equipped relics and a unique legion and stronghold. Once you've made your choice though, you're then struck with another wonderful choice. You can actually play multiplayer in this game, and it actually works. From live sessions, as you would expect, to asynchronous sessions. I tried both, and for the remainder of this video, we'll be exploring multiplayer exclusively. Very cool point of difference. The asynchronous sessions can go up to a week in turn length timer, so you've got plenty of time to jump back in, play your next turn, and think about your move. Though, I'm not quite sure, at least if you're anything like us, you'll be willing to wait that long. Quickly, Solium Infernum is fueled by this orders system. You have a very limited number of orders you can use per turn, and every action, including the ones that we're about to discuss, will use up your orders. Something as simple as, of course, moving across the cantons of the map to try and capture them for yourself, or potentially move to a kind of place of interest. In this case, my allied player, a real human being, is going to attempt to capture the face in the sand, which will provide +2 prestige per turn, a vital currency for victory in this, what we've set up, very short, fast-paced version of Solium Infernum. Here we can also see the combat playing out, another feature that I absolutely adore, simple to use, difficult to master. We'll delve into it a little bit deeper as we move through the video. Because you might also use your orders to plot schemes, these kinds of rewards, these prestigious quests. Or alternatively, jump in and spend your hard-earned, tributed money on a new legion, a new unit to explore the map with, a praetor or artifact manuscript to potentially buff a unit or have broader empire effects. Either way, you're going to be selecting or seeking some tributes fairly often, and that will also probably fill up some of your orders. Given there are so few per turn, each decision feels very impactful in Solium Infernum, at kind of a grand level, where trade-offs matter more than anything else, with that finite number of orders, which you can expand as you move through the power trees. Speaking of expanding, we're going to expand out the scope of this video now and focus in on one game in particular, one multiplayer session. In this case, choosing to jump directly into the diplomatic screen, where there are a number of options, not all of them available immediately. You'll have to move through and progress and rank up. It could be something as simple as giving them a gift to build some kind of fragile alliance, although most of the actions inside of this kind of civilization in hell world tend to be a little bit more nefarious, as you can imagine. Early movement is also one of my favorite things to do, to block off other players. Here, my units walking across these cantons tiles for the first time and capturing them for me. My opponent in red won't be able to move through unless they want to fight me over it. Which of course again brings in that bazaar that I mentioned in the introductory part of the video, where legions can be accompanied by praetors, or we could also use them outside of direct combat to defend us in duels, which we'll touch on in just a moment. The bidding for them is real, it's live. If you don't bid enough, you can absolutely be outbid. My alleged ally was fairly keen to do that to me at least twice throughout the session. But the artifacts, the manuscripts, they add a nice extra layer here too, that you can stack extra abilities onto your units, or maybe move more into the dark arts, the rituals, which can be unlocked through a progressive power tree system and used in your turn just like this. Find a ritual, whether it be a buff, a debuff, or something that falls somewhere in between, and cast it onto the map. The order of your actions matters as well, of course, so keep that in the back of your mind as the broader politics starts to play out. Here, asked to vote on a fairly simple edict, though these decisions, the ability to gang up on other players, and your power that you might have when you happen to be the regent of the conclave, all help to build that broader, as I say, devious political world that surrounds this game. Which is of course always playing out. Here I am sort of psyching out my ally and that yellowy color next to me, pretending to threaten them, but of course, in reality having no luck. Here, Block by far has the supreme military power. Probably not a good idea for me to try and take the Altar of Abomination. You can see the fight playing out round by round. First ranged, then melee, and then a magical infernal round at the end, where stats go up against one another to determine how much hit points you'll lose and who will ultimately be the victor. Here we can see 0 ranged versus 3, so Block is able to get 3 damage through to the altar. In the next round, it's seemingly 8 versus 8. No damage dealt, no damage received by either player. And finally, in the last infernal round, he edges out the altar with 2 additional damage. However, if you want to stretch beyond those initially neutral altars, it might be time to engage in a bit more advanced diplomacy, starting with an insult, maybe a declaration of vendetta against you, where prestige is wagered that your opponent will be able to achieve something that you won't. Checking out the broader diplomatic screen, you can kind of get a feel for where things are playing out, but ultimately it comes down to this. Will you declare a vendetta? Challenge your opponent to a duel? How will you settle these discussions, disagreements, or indeed demands? The earlier thing that I mentioned, the duels, where you assign your praetor and go through round by round combat, will be determined by their strength, or a little bit of luck. Alternatively, also, we could set these broader objectives inside of a vendetta. I will take a certain amount of your cantons within a certain amount of time, and if I can do that, I will win this much prestige in our wager, is fundamentally how that system works and plays out. It's very neat because it makes you think a little bit about the broader implications. Here I'm headed back to the bazaar realizing I'm gonna need a bit of a stronger unit. So with some quick consolidation of my currency, I'm able to produce the goods. The exact amount of money I need to place a bid, which as you can see, much to my friend's surprise, the next turn, bursting its way out of the earth, comes a much more powerful legion. Potentially backed up by some of the stuff going on around the edges. Here I'm inside of those power trees that I've mentioned earlier, looking for new spells to unlock, while at the same time, my big lumbering beast is finally allowing me to leave my mark on the world. Here you can see my range stats, my melee stats, and ultimately this brutal infernal stat 9-0 is more than enough to take down these neutral places of interest, these places of power that have been sitting on the map, ultimately being ignored by me for the whole game. This will be beneficial to building up my prestige in what is likely going to be a prestige victory, given how low we've set the turn timer in this game. This is of course just one strategy, right? One way that I've chosen to approach it, as I watch my opponents, in this case an AI opponent, handily trying to take another point of interest on the map. They too are vying for victory. And speaking of the AI, I have to say, just to briefly touch on it here, it was very good. I'm a fairly regular strategy gamer, that might come as no surprise to you, and I found it had, honestly, a very competent level of competition with me. My friend who I was playing with, almost entirely new to strategy games, which is a whole nother can of worms to open in of itself, also found it challenging, but with me there and the two of us sort of kind of working together in this loose alliance, ended up not being too difficult. Which is another credit that I have to honestly give to Solium Infernum. It was fairly easy for Block to pick it up. In fact, well, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but a very competitive player, despite being very new to the genre. And I think that that speaks volumes about Solium Infernum's depth, that kind of grand level of how will you spend these very finite resources, these orders, and the great opportunity cost of your focus against what seems to be a pretty easy game to pick up and play. The orders simultaneously give this nice structure to a turn, helping to gently ease you into what you should be doing, though that's likely to change a lot too. Here as we approach the end of the game, the two of us neck and neck for first place with a whole load of prestige, I find that this unit of mine, out gathering more land, is suddenly struck down with a ritual. And this will happen again in the same turn, as both the AI and my human alleged ally begin to start to realize that really there are only two people who could potentially win here, and one of them is me. And just like that, with a second infernal affliction cast on it, my other legion is gone, completely destroyed, without even arguably being able to pick up its weapons and fight. Just one of the ways that Solium Infernum threw a spanner in the work for this gameplay. As the world begins to darken, begins to become more grim, I make a final push. Maybe if I move to the throne at the center of the map and capture this wholly too powerful building, excommunicating myself from everybody else, I might have a chance to reach for victory. Goodness knows if anybody's going to be able to do it, it's going to be me and my great big beast. Maybe with some rituals thrown in around the outside, trying to build a cohesive strategy with the players around me in this case to maybe have a chance at victory. Speaking of which, there are of course many different ways you could get there, such as the slightly unorthodox taking of the pandemonium in the center, or choosing a more perhaps traditional military victory by destroying each of the other enemies, leaving you as the sole victor to the throne. Or play it out, in this case initially 25 turns and then around 12 turns of deliberation, where a leader will ultimately be selected based on their prestige. Essentially a sort of score victory, in this case prestige is the currency that will determine who wins, and you can see it here at the breakdown of every turn, just to keep you on your toes as you frantically upgrade your military capability, in my case, to go for one last great big push. Finally, there are some other sort of slightly more devious ways to win. There's a relic that you can use quite early on. You basically select a victim, and if they win, you will steal the victory from them instead. So some underhand ways to get there, and also some very open, shall we say confronting ways to get there as well. And with that, it's probably a reasonable spot to start to wrap this video up. Here, you can see an angelic host. On one hand, very beautiful, on the other hand, very dangerous. And just another small example of the kinds of detail and challenge that this game will throw at you. I couldn't even begin to cover it all of the different decisions that you might want to make, the different buffs, the different strategies, the different layers that you might be adding to your legions. Here I am making one final push, and obviously just not quite strong enough to scratch the center, and while I have my back turned, the vicious vultures that I like to call my neighbors decide to reach in and prey on me, taking my prized face in the sand that I'd worked so hard to capture earlier on. Those little moments of heartbreak alongside the challenges are ultimately what gives Solium Infernum its soul, though. Decisions are difficult, orders take time, movement takes time. But when you bring in something crushing, when you deliver that blow, it feels so satisfying. Unfortunately, I wouldn't know the full extent of that satisfying feeling in this game, as my giant walking fortress, for all of its cost and upkeep and slow lumbering movement, wasn't quite enough to get me across the line. And there is a new Dark Majesty of Hell. At least it's one of my human friends? Allies? Not quite sure where to place Block Chonk in the end. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget, Solium Infernum is out now. You can check it out using the link below. I'd highly encourage you to do so, and thanks again to League of Geeks for sponsoring this video. I'll see you next time.